and then we also make sense of them differently. So in this talk, I'm going to obviously talk about how I experience reality and how I make sense of it. But also, I want to look at the findings of science, particularly quantum physics, and biology, and use some ideas to pull the two together and hopefully present a reality view that is capable of explaining physical and non-physical phenomena. And by non-physical phenomena, I mean anything that you can experience with your consciousness that is subjective. So, since I've been looking for a different worldview, I've met many amazing people, and asking them how they experience reality and really sharing my deepest secrets with them has given me the opportunity to look into the lenses of different people. I met somebody, now a close friend of mine, a Bulgarian DJ who 2 years ago suddenly was approached by non-physical beings. At least that's the reality he experiences. And these non-physical beings, you could call them spirits or whatever you want, beings that are not visible to us. And they asked him whether they could bring forth messages through his body. And first it was a very, very scary thing for him. But then he developed trust and allowed them to come through. And the amazing thing is that they sometimes come through and speak about agriculture and how important it is. And this is a Bulgarian DJ who does not know anything about agriculture. And sometimes, while that is happening to him, he would be conscious, would be aware of what these beings are saying through his vocal cords. Other times, he would not be aware. I became close friends with him because I was struggling with a similar thing also 2 years ago. I had a very, very rigid worldview, only believing that what we see, feel, taste, smell, and hear is all there is, and everything else is an hallucination. That was my worldview until I was 24. And I would argue with spiritual people all the time that they are just following a feeling and not really thinking enough about the logical consequences of what they're saying. And now I'm totally at 180, I'm arguing from the other perspective. But I've kept my rigid intellect, and I will try to make sense of everything through solid logic. What happened to me is I went to a meditation retreat, and after meditating for about 60 hours, silently, not talking to anybody, this all was stripped away from me. Everything that I thought was all there is was gone. And I was sort of in the hands, or under the mercy of these beings that were sort of my guides, but I wasn't even ready to be like, oh yeah, you're my guide, thank you. Not at all. I was like, what the fuck, get away from me, I'm going crazy, this is insane, oh my god, like, the whole thing was such a massive explosion. My entire worldview got shattered in one big blow, and I wasn't ready to integrate, let go, and create something new at the spot, so I thought I was going crazy. And, you know, in the eyes of many, I was going crazy. I was communicating with beings from another dimension. I mean, that's fucking crazy. And these beings were asking me to complete these tasks. One of which is to communicate the experience. The other one is more ambiguous and was sort of not in this reality. But anyway, I don't want to tell too much about my personal experience. I actually want to go make sense of it and why it is relevant to future. Vandana Shiva said, the planet can grow twice the food we need if we adopt a sustainable food system. Systemic change is needed. And what is systemic change? Every system that we build starts in the mind. Everything that we design, we think is a good idea, or at least we think that designing something that benefits the few is a good idea. At least the few think that. So what we really need is a shift in that. Shifting the belief that if we just design something that benefits just the individual, everything will work shift to a more holistic, inclusive worldview. And Madana Shiva came to this realization by studying quantum physics. She realized that the world is not just objects connected with other objects, but rather there is this fluid nature of reality, and that everything is really connected. And that realization made her shift into becoming a food activist and saving seeds. I want to talk to you a little bit about the crazy things that are happening currently, and some of them all that happened. Harry Cliff recently gave a talk. Harry Cliff is a physicist at the Large Hadron Collider, and his talk was called "Have We Reached the End of Physics?" What he was realizing is that the mechanistic worldview, he didn't say that, but that was the underlying assumption, that if we use the materialistic worldview to further explore matter, we'll never get beyond matter. Where does it come from? We're still in the illusion of time and space, and seem to be trapped in that. Wim Hof, some of you might know him, the Iceman, spent 2 hours surrounded by ice cubes. That is physically impossible, but he claims to have the power with his mind to influence his immune system and regulate his body temperature. Jesus. Shaolin monks drilling themselves into the head claim they have the ability to direct chi energy to resist the drill. And scientists have been working with them, measuring how much pressure they put, and it's physically impossible. Dr. Ian Stevenson, I had the privilege to interview one of his colleagues, Jim Tucker. He told me they collected together 2,500 case studies of children remembering their past lives. And 58% of them are solved. Which means that what the kid remembers was actually a life that existed. They went all over the planet and explored these case studies in depth. And there's so much evidence that can't be explained through the materialistic worldview. William Buhlman started out as a psychologist, then suddenly started to have out-of-body experiences while he was in college. Now that is his life works. He has written 3 books on the topic, and he has conducted the International Out-of-Body Survey and has received over 16,000 responses of other people having out-of-body experiences. An out-of-body experience is an experience where suddenly you see a body from the outside. At least that's the very beginning of an out-of-body experience. But if you practice it, you can go much, much further with it. William Buhlman says that he's capable of connecting to other realities that are parallel to this one, and he sees the world more as a collection of experiential realities. And each one of them, as you go outward, becomes more and more love-based, and less defined by form. I myself have processed out-of-body experiences and had some crazy experiences too, and it actually works. If you do this for a month, every time you go to sleep, you visualize yourself standing in front of a mirror. When you fall asleep, at some point you're going to wake up and be what you were imagining, and then you can walk back and see your body, and once you are not in your body anymore, you're free to explore other information systems. Between 1975 and 2005, 3,500 individual cases of near-death experiences have been reviewed in one or another scientific study. A near-death experience is the experience that happens when, actually, I have a definition right here. A near-death experience, NDE, is a personal experience associated with impending death, encompassing multiple possible sensations, including detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, total serenity, security, warmth, the experience of absolute dissolution, and the presence of the light. Explanatory models for the near-death experience can be divided into several broad categories, including physiological, psychological, and transcendental explanations. Research from neuroscience considers the near-death experience to be a hallucinatory state caused by various physiological and psychological factors. They forgot to mention researchers who are stuck in the materialistic worldview. Because you can't really explain a near-death experience with physiological or psychological evidence or theories, because many of these near-death experiences happen in hospitals, where the people are actually hooked up to measurement devices that record their brain and heart activity. And there's people that have zero brain or heart activity. They're clinically dead. Meanwhile, they're floating above their body, hearing the conversations that happen around them. And then, when their body is brought back to life, they accurately report what was going on around them. There's much more to the near-death experience too. Once these people are detached from the body, they see this white, non-blinding light that radiates love. They fly into that, where they are suddenly given an entire understanding of what this experience is about, the human experience. They meet mystical beings. Sometimes they interpret them as Jesus, or as Allah, or any other savior. And there is so many of these that have been carefully recorded, and there's no doubt that you can be conscious while your body is dead. So what happens when a neuroscientist has a near-death experience? They lose all their friends and become religious. In this presentation, I want to talk about how to interpret these experiences without dogma, without becoming religious. So let's start with this one. This is not a pipe. Well, let's zoom in, let's take the usual physicist approach and try to see what's really okay. But if it's not a pipe, what the fuck is it? Let's see if we can zoom in some more. I don't see any, a little bit white, black, okay. Cannot zoom more. So this approach didn't work as well as I thought. I think the issue we're having right now is that we are trapped in the illusion of a digital picture. We're zooming in more and more, we might get more pixels, but eventually we cannot zoom anymore. What we really have to do is we have to step outside of the illusion and take a different perspective, like this little girl has. We gotta pull the veil aside and look what is underneath the illusion. Okay, let's do that. Here we go. Zeros and ones. This computer is currently calculating a tremendous amount of zeros and ones in order to provide you with the illusion. Oh, do you even see the zeros and ones?
Yeah.
Can we take the light down? Yeah, well, there is a bunch of zeros and ones here. And, can you see them?
No.
Okay, whatever, the other ones are better. Okay, so let's go to another slide. Here, these ones are better. There you go. So, zeros and ones, organized in groups of 8. That's what the computer is doing in order to provide you with this beautiful picture. The thing about zeros and ones is you can store any kind of information by rearranging these zeros and ones. The computer interprets them as on and off. But by rearranging on and off in different configurations, we can store vast amounts of information. The first 8 zeros and ones is called 1 byte, short for binary digit. And you will see they're all slightly different unless they are representing the same type of information. So what this sentence really is, actually I gotta go back here. So this is not a new idea. Organizing duality, 0 and 1, on and off, in order to store information. Ancient Chinese philosophers have long entertained the idea that everything we perceive could actually come out of yin and yang. Taoist philosophy is that Wu Qi, the fundamental duality of yin and yang, gives rise to form, gives rise to matter, to the elements, gives rise to us, gives rise to qi. And that we, by doing a spiritual practice, are essentially taking these configurations of yin and yang and are balancing them in a way that is Shin, which is spiritual energy, and that we are then returning that energy back to the fundamental duality, which is beyond this reality. So, this sentence here will make a lot of sense to you after the talk. If we develop the will to benefit others, we lower the entropy of the information system we are part of. But right now, I just want to focus on I, F, space, and W, because that's what the first line of binary information represents. 0110101 is I, and the second one is F, and so on. So I took these bytes and thought, could I actually represent them or express them in terms of yin and yang? And that's actually possible. So by having 4 different types of yin and yang, you can represent every configuration of zeros and ones. White represents 0, black represents 1. So if you read through, these yin and yangs are actually representing the binary code I showed you before. 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, and so forth. So this idea that a duality can create complexity can be very useful when we want to explore what reality is. So, now let's look at this universe and ask ourselves, if this is not a pipe, what is it? Let's take the same approach. Zoom in, find atoms. Zoom in, find electrons. Okay, but these electrons are no longer physical. They're acting based on a probability wave interference pattern if we don't observe them. If we do observe them, they become physical particles. What the fuck's going on here? I'm going to go back to that later. For now, let's just keep that in mind. Let's take a step beyond the physical dimension and talk about the 2 ways we can inquire about reality that is not going into matter. Rational exploration and direct experience. The Buddha cleared his mind, detached from thought patterns and belief systems, and did that for thousands of hours. And by doing that, was able to perceive reality directly for what it is. While Konrad Zuse thought a lot about physics and came to the same realization. Sorry, I didn't mean to zoom in on that word. Konrad Zuse was the first person to come up with the idea that the universe is computer information. This idea is called digital physics. Okay, the underlying assumption of digital physics is that all of this is an illusion. If it's computed information, if there's something more fundamental, then time and space are illusions. And that's also what Einstein discovered, that time and space are illusions. Einstein said, time and space are illusions, very persistent ones, but they're still illusions. The Buddha came to the same realization. This is a very old idea. The Taoists had the same idea. Plato had the same idea. That we live in the world of shadows, while there is a light that casts the shadows, and that light being a more fundamental reality. The Buddha created a whole movement, and many people still follow his teachings. And Konrad Zuse also created a movement, and many people still follow him. Actually, that's a wrong picture, sorry. Tom Campbell, another old man with a slightly more appropriate beard, I've met Tom Campbell. He's a NASA physicist and also an out-of-body explorer. Very interesting things to bring together. For 40 years, he's been leaving his body. He told me, Wenzl, I have a day and I have a night job. He tells me that when he goes to sleep, he leaves his body, goes into another reality where he manages how fear-based information systems are managed. He has like meetings about that with other non-physical beings or other beings who leave the body. And then he goes back and does physics in this body. And he came up with the idea that, well, he didn't come up with the idea, but he used Conrad Zuy's idea about digital physics and mixed it with the assumption that consciousness is the computer. That consciousness is what rearranges the information and provides us with this illusion. He believes he calls the larger reality the larger consciousness system. This is obviously not a photo of the larger consciousness system, because if I want to take a camera and take a photo of the larger consciousness system, it's impossible, because everything that I hold in my hand, my body, the camera, all of that is a product of the larger consciousness system. But I used images of fractals because I want to highlight the idea that you can create tremendous complexity through repetitive processes. If you have a process, and the outcome of that process is fed back into the process, that's a fractal. And that goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Survival of the fittest is a fractal because it's a simple process that builds on itself. Organisms or consciousness makes choices based on a rule set, and the choices that have the lowest entropy, that are the most organized, are the choices that survive. And then that same idea applies to the new product. But survival of the fittest is really not survival of the fittest, because on the cellular level, we find systems. There are no individuals. Survival of the fittest system is really what Darwin discovered. Because trillions of cells work together to make one organism function. And if these cells work really well together, then this organism will survive. So we're really talking about survival of the fittest system. So could evolution, all this complexity, really happen in a binary system? In a system that just was created out of two opposites. It could be fear, love, it could be black, white, darkness, light, on, off, distorted, non-distorted. Anything that creates a difference can be used to organize information. So I want to show you this video of Christoph Adami, who works on creating digital organisms. He's written a software that allows organisms to evolve.
Different strains are colored in different colors. And as you see here, there are groups that are growing on top of each other because they're spreading. Anytime there's a program that's better, that's surviving in this world, due to whatever mutation it has acquired, it's going to spread over the others and drive the others to extinction. So I'm going to show you a movie where you're going to see that kind of dynamics. And this movie these kind of experiments have started with programs that we wrote ourselves. We write our own self-replicator and are very proud of ourselves, and we put them in. And what you see immediately is that there are waves and waves of innovation. By the way, this is highly accelerated, so it's like 1,000 generations a second. But immediately the system goes like, what kind of dumb piece of code was this? This can be improved upon in so many ways, so quickly. So you see waves of new types taking over the other types, and this type of activity goes on for quite a while until the main easy things have been acquired by these programs, and then you see sort of like a stasis coming on, where the system essentially waits for a new type of innovation like this one, which is going to spread over all the innovations that were before and is erasing the genes that it had before until a new type of higher level of complexity has been achieved, and this process goes on and on and on. So So what we see here is a system that lives in very much the way that we're used to life goes.
So this idea can give us a different perspective on this reality, because it shows us that it's possible to use duality to create evolution. So now let's look at this physical universe one more time. Let's take a closer look at electrons and photons. And now we're going to go a little bit into quantum physics. So this is the double slit experiment. Who's familiar with this double slit experiment? Okay, most of you. Okay. I'm going to give a quick explanation anyway. So imagine you have a bucket full of tennis balls that are dipped into ink. And you're standing in front of a wall, and there's two slits in the wall, and behind that wall, with the two slits, is another wall. So now you're just throwing tennis balls that are dipped into ink, and there's two slits. Sometimes a ball goes through one or the other slit, right? Now whenever it hits the other wall, it will make two spots, right? What we'll get would look like this. Here we're throwing the balls, and here are the two spots happening on the third wall. On the second wall, sorry. Okay, well, that's not what we get at all. We get stripes. How absurd would that be? If you're throwing these balls and suddenly you look at the second wall and there's a bunch of stripes. How is that physically possible? So scientists have said that particles are actually waves when they're not observed. Which means, well, probability waves, to be more specific. A probability wave means that wherever the crest is higher, the particle is more likely to appear. Wherever the crest is lower, it's less likely to appear. So they're saying that these probability waves travel through the two slits and interfere with each other. And that what we find is essentially an interference pattern. A good way to think of an interference pattern is to imagine two fishermen standing on a porch. It's hot, they're sweating, they haven't caught any fish, their mouth is dry, they're super bored, and they start shaking up the water. They have nothing better to do. And suddenly the waves travel towards each other and interfere, and you can see where the white spots are, two crests are meeting, and the water becomes amplified. Wherever the water stays flat means a crest and a trough met. Wherever the water dips down, two troughs met. So you get a third wave that is just the addition of the two waves, which is called an interference pattern. So this is what happens when you shine light through two slits. You get those stripes, because the waves of the light interfere. So scientists thought, okay, let's shoot individual particles and see if that still happens. So they were shooting individual particles, and what you get was still an interference pattern. So how is that possible? How can individual particles interfere with themselves? How is that possible? So they put measurement devices next to the two slits to observe through which slit the particle is traveling. As soon as they did that, they were back to the tennis balls. No more interference pattern. So scientists were forced to come to the realization that their own knowledge about this experiment changes the experiment. And I think that's a profound realization, that our perception, our knowledge about reality physically alters reality. But there's also a different way of thinking of it. Tom Campbell interprets this phenomenon with the larger consciousness system. He says that experience is actually the connection to a data stream. That there's nothing physical out here at all. We are all just agreeing on this physical reality because we're receiving the same data stream. So just like a computer provides the online player with a data stream, the same way the larger consciousness system provides us with a data stream. And this idea also explains relativity theory, at least why there is such a thing as relativity theory. all know that the speed of light is the fastest speed that we can have in this physical reality. For example, if I were to stand on a train with a flashlight, and I shine the flashlight in the direction the train is going, the speed of the train would not be added to the speed of the light coming out of the flashlight. Somebody standing on the ground could shine a flashlight and the light would travel at the same speed. If I would stand on a train and shoot a shotgun, the speed of the train would be added to the speed of the bullet. So why is that the case? Tom Campbell says it is because every virtual reality updates itself, meaning that nothing can travel faster than delta t. Delta t is the interval that determines when the computer reloads all the pixels. So whenever all the pixels get reloaded, then a new motion can be represented. And the speed of light is limited by that interval. The biggest difference between a simulation like World of Warcraft and our reality is that our reality has evolved based on probability, while World of Warcraft was programmed. What is probability? I will make the argument that probability is free will, and I'm actually not the first person at all to make that argument. Princeton mathematician John H. Conway created the free will theorem. I can't go into detail of this experiment because it's hugely complex, but the basic idea is that he managed to show that the spin of a particle that's called 101 is not existent before it's observed. So only when the researcher goes and asks or looks at this particle, then it decides which way it's spinning. Before it's not even spinning, or it doesn't even exist. So this means that this particle has the choice to decide which way to spin. So do electrons have free will? Yes, in the sense that their behavior is not a function of the past. They act based on probability. So free will is an organizational principle. Decentralized systems are the most resilient systems, and decentralized systems can only exist if you have choosing units. So if you think of any system in nature, it's all decentralized systems. Any other system falls apart. That's why our current economic system is so imbalanced, because it's moving away from decentralization. And in order to have decentralization, you need to have individual units that just make choices. Monoculture farms and permaculture farms are a great example between centralized systems and decentralized systems. Permaculture farms are more resilient, are more sustainable because of their complexity. There's so many different ecosystems and plants that interact with each other that the nutrient flow becomes way more effective and long-lasting and sustainable. While we all know that monoculture farms pollute our waters, erode the earth, and only make a few farmers rich. The same is true with decentralized local economies and centralized economies. A few corporations having massive control. That's an imbalanced system. Local economies create more jobs, benefit the community better, provide the workers to actually be more in touch with the environment, make more creative choices, and just have way more long-lasting value than centralized economies. Trees exist because they're efficient information systems, and they're efficient because they're decentralized. Trillions of cells are in one tree, and these cells all make choices. They're all choosing to work together, when to fabricate which enzymes, how to pass on these nutrients, and the whole system becomes resilient, and that's why trees survive. And just like these animals as well. The brain cells are a tremendously complicated, decentralized system. There's not one cell telling any other cell what to do. They all act out of their own will. A system that is able to manage the data flow of our entire universe must be better organized than the systems that have evolved within it, which means that the larger consciousness system must be comprised of choosing units or beings that make choices. Does that make sense? So if we have this free will system, this reality, which is a product of a larger reality, then that larger reality also needs to be decentralized. There needs to be also choosing units in there in order for that same complexity to be managed and organized in the most efficient way. And what is the consciousness modality that allows decentralized systems to exist? Well, it's the will to benefit others. And that's love. The will to benefit others is love. And love is an organizational probability. It organizes probability to make it more likely to benefit the whole, rather than the probability to benefit itself. So I think that love is not actually just a human emotion. Yes, we have evolved chemical and physical expressions for love, but the principle is very fundamental to free will. If you have free will, you will have the choice to benefit others, or not to benefit others. So wherever there is free will, there will be love or fear. Whether you're talking about flying octopus or whatever crazy creature you can imagine, if that creature can choose, then it can choose to benefit others that are also choosing, or not to. So trust, compassion, patience, transparency, communication, honesty, all of that are human principles that we have evolved in order to develop the consciousness modality of love. And what we really do when we become love, when we become more loving towards each other, is we lower the entropy of the entire system. Because whenever we act out of love, we collaborate, we bring decentralized organization back into existence. So love lowers entropy, and fear creates higher entropy.
Can you give a definition of entropy for those of us who...
Entropy, is chaos. If something is not organized, it's falling apart. That's entropy. So you see the right hand of the word is falling apart, while the left one is more organized. Now that's what love does in decentralized systems. So it should come as no surprise that once our physical bodies pass away, we are in love, because this whole thing originates out of love. It should come as no surprise that there is a light that radiates love when our bodies pass away. So how do we create the most love while we are in physical form? That's really all we have to do, right? Whenever we engage with reality, we should think, how do we create the most love? Like whether it is in ourselves, whether it is in creating physical infrastructure, all of it goes back to love. Evolving our own consciousness, meditating, practicing things that reduce our negative thought patterns, helping other people do the same, and, of course, creating physical infrastructure that allows humans to live according to the laws of decentralization. And that's essentially what YIP does. Permaculture farms, alternative education, all of that is creating physical infrastructure that allows other souls to go in and reach their potential. Whether it is plants or animals or humans, whenever we create a system that is based in decentralized organization, we do the entire universe a favor. So this is pretty much my talk, and now this sentence will make more sense. If we develop the will to benefit others, we lower the entropy of the information system we are part of. So thank you so much for listening and giving me the opportunity to share.